The sleek glass doors of Apex Technologies swung open at precisely 6:47 a.m., as they did every morning, revealing CEO Margaret Chen striding through the lobby in her signature power suit. She barely noticed the elderly janitor mopping near the elevator. Why would she? Her mind was already racing through the day's merger negotiations, the quarterly projections, the board meeting that could make or break her latest expansion plan. Margaret had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, and she hadn't done it by getting distracted by the hired help. But on this particular Tuesday morning, everything changed in the span of 30 seconds. Margaret's 8-year-old son, Lucas, trailed behind her, his backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. The boy had been complaining of headaches for weeks, but Margaret kept dismissing it as attention-seeking behavior. Single parenthood was hard enough without Lucas constantly trying to slow her down with phantom ailments. She'd scheduled a doctor's appointment for next month. That would have to be good enough. "Mom, my head really hurts," Lucas whimpered, stumbling slightly as they approached the elevator. "Lucas, not now. We've been through this. You're fine. You just need to." The boy suddenly swayed, his face turning pale. Before Margaret could react, the janitor dropped his mop with a clatter and lunged forward, catching Lucas just as his knees buckled. The man's weathered hands gripped her son firmly, lowering him gently to the polished marble floor. "Don't touch him!" Margaret shrieked, her protective instincts exploding into rage. She shoved the janitor away with surprising force, sending the elderly man stumbling backward. "Get your hands off my child!" The janitor, his name tag read Henry Wilson, held up his hands in surrender, his lined face etched with concern. "Ma'am, please. The boy needs help. His pupils are different sizes. I've seen this before." "Security." Margaret's voice echoed through the cavernous lobby. Within seconds, 2 uniformed guards appeared. "Escort this man out. He's fired. I want him banned from this building immediately." "Ma'am, I'm just trying to. I said get him out." Margaret turned to Lucas, who was sitting up now, looking dazed and confused. "Sweetie, did he hurt you? Tell Mommy what happened." Lucas blinked slowly. He caught me, Mom. I was falling. He grabbed you without permission. That's unacceptable." Margaret pulled out her phone, already dialing her assistant. "I want HR to process his termination within the hour. And I want to know how our security screening lets someone like that around children." Henry didn't resist as the guards took his arms. He simply looked at Margaret with sad, knowing eyes. "Check his pupils, ma'am. Please. One is bigger than the other. It could be serious." Margaret ignored him, cradling Lucas as the guards escorted Henry toward the exit. The small crowd of early arriving employees that had gathered quickly dispersed, not wanting to be associated with the drama. Margaret's reputation for ruthlessness was well earned. Nobody wanted to be her next target. By mid-morning, Margaret had pushed the incident from her mind. She was in the middle of a video conference with investors in Tokyo when her assistant knocked urgently on her office door, something she knew never to do during calls. "This better be critical," Margaret snapped, muting her microphone. "It's Lucas. The school nurse called. He collapsed during reading time. They've called an ambulance." The world tilted sideways. Margaret ended the call without explanation, grabbed her purse, and ran. At Mercy General Hospital, Margaret paced the emergency room like a caged animal while doctors examined her son. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, a neurosurgeon approached, his expression grave. "Mrs. Chen, we need to run an MRI immediately. Lucas is showing signs of increased intracranial pressure. His symptoms, the headaches, the episode this morning, different pupil sizes, these could indicate a serious problem." "What kind of problem?" Margaret's voice cracked. "We won't know until we see the imaging. But I need to be frank with you, this could be a brain bleed, a tumor, or an aneurysm. The next few hours are critical. The MRI seemed to take forever. Margaret sat in the waiting room, her phone buzzing incessantly with work emergencies she couldn't bring herself to care about. For the first time in years, she prayed. When the neurosurgeon finally emerged, his face was ashen. "Mrs. Chen, your son has a cerebral aneurysm. It's large and in a dangerous position. It could rupture at any moment. If that janitor hadn't caught him this morning, if Lucas had hit his head when he fell." The doctor paused. "The impact could have triggered a rupture. Your son would likely have died before the ambulance arrived." Margaret felt the room spinning. What? The man who caught him this morning may have saved his life. Any jarring impact to the head could have been fatal. We need to operate immediately. I have to tell you, Mrs. Chen, even a few hours delay could have been catastrophic. If you'd waited until next month like your assistant mentioned, or even until this afternoon. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The surgery took 6 hours. Margaret sat alone in the surgical waiting room, replaying the morning's events over and over. Henry Wilson's face haunted her, his concern, his urgency, his desperate plea for her to check Lucas's pupils. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known. And she'd fired him. Humiliated him. Had him physically removed from the building. Lucas survived the surgery. As he lay sleeping in the ICU, tubes and monitors surrounding his small body, Margaret made a decision. She had her assistant track down Henry Wilson's contact information, but when she called, the number was disconnected. She sent her head of security to his last known address, a modest apartment in a low-income neighborhood across town. The landlord answered the door. "Henry? He had a stroke 2 days ago. He's at county hospital, but I heard it's pretty bad. He doesn't have insurance, so." The man shrugged sadly. Margaret drove to county hospital immediately, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. She found Henry in a shared room, lying motionless in a bed by the window. The stroke had left him partially paralyzed, and according to his chart, he had no family and no insurance. The hospital was processing him for transfer to a long-term care facility, the kind where people went to be forgotten. A nurse was adjusting his fore when Margaret approached. "Are you family?" "No, I'm..." Margaret struggled to find the words. "I'm someone who owes him everything." Over the next few days, as Lucas recovered, Margaret learned Henry Wilson's story. He'd been a combat medic in Vietnam, trained to recognize the signs of head trauma and neurological emergencies. After the war, he'd struggled with PTSD and had eventually lost everything: his marriage, his career as a paramedic, his home. Janitorial work was all he could manage, but his medical instincts had never left him. He'd been working at Apex Technologies for 3 years, arriving before dawn and leaving after sunset, invisible to everyone including Margaret. Until the moment he'd seen a child in danger and his training had kicked in. Margaret transferred Henry to a private room in the same hospital where Lucas was recovering. She hired the best rehabilitation specialists in the state. When HR tried to discuss the termination paperwork, she tore it up and had Henry reinstated with full benefits, back pay, and a formal apology from the company. But she didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, when Lucas was finally discharged, Margaret brought him to visit Henry. The elderly man had regained some movement and could speak, though his words came slowly. "Henry," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion, "I can never apologize enough for how I treated you. You saved my son's life, and I responded with cruelty and suspicion. I judged you based on your job title instead of seeing you as a human being who was trying to help." Henry smiled weakly. "You were scared. Mothers protect their children. I understand." "No, you don't understand. The doctor said that if Lucas had hit his head that morning, he would have died. You caught him. You saved him. And I..." Tears streamed down her face. "I had you fired." Lucas stepped